Sympathy is understanding that you recognize someone's situation, but you're still emotionally distant. Empathy is when you're able to actually feel what that person's feeling in that situation because you've either been there or you can put yourself in that place to feel what they're feeling in that moment and you share space. We keep mixing the two up. People think that you want to be sympathetic versus empathetic. I understand that sympathy seems more mainstream because people see when someone's going through something, you can say, oh my gosh, poor baby, give me a hug, come here. You want sympathy from your parents, right? That's what most of us have been conditioned to get. So when you see people melting down and people calling people Karens, that's a sympathy moment because in that moment, it's a moment of distress and they want someone to feel pity for them. That's what kids do, right? When you're like, oh my gosh, I hurt myself. And it might not be that serious, but in that moment, you just want to be like, I hurt and I want you to give me attention. That person has to then say, okay, I will give you sympathy and pity party with you, but at the same time, I know it's not that serious. A lot of people believe that's what they want, but then when they get into connections and you're talking to someone and you're saying, why am I talking to people and I don't feel connected to them? Because most people understand how to sympathize with you and say, oh, that sucks, but it's not my life. Oh man, that really does blow. Hope that never happens to me. Still not my life, right? Empathy is like, wow, that really sucks. I remember when I had a similar situation and here's how I got out of it. Most people are conditioned to hear that type of empathy as you're taking the conversation from them and making it about you. And for a long time, I used to beat myself up because I used to believe I was taking people's thunder and I wasn't on purpose. I am definitely someone who gets overzealous and I talk a lot and I definitely can't overtalk, but it's not on purpose. So I try to pull back and contain that for myself and let people walk through their own sympathy of self, right? Because you got to get to empathy eventually when you're like, okay, boo, 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 I fell down, it hurt. Now what? Empathize with yourself. Okay, well, in this situation, what's going to make this feel better is probably washing off the scar, putting up coverage over it so it's not getting more exposed, and letting it rest. Because you're empathizing with the body. The body has to heal. So you can't just leave it all exposed and get mad at the body for healing slow because you're leaving wounds open for others to come take care of, right? That's why I say you don't want to over sympathize with people's situations. You want to empathize. I can understand where you're coming from. I can see what that must feel like. When they're talking about things in politics, and you're talking about things in religion, you're talking about things in how you believe you were raised, most people want you to sympathize with them because they were forced to follow someone's rules. So because they had to put up with it and suck it up and pretend that's what they want you to do. That is sympathy to me. There's different definitions of it, but I'm talking more about the social aspect of how we conditionally act towards people who really aren't in pain, but they're pretending they're in pain, versus people who really are in pain, but you look at them like, get over it. And this is why I say, when we're talking about understanding anybody's perspective on life, I understand that there are people who we call evil-minded. I understand how they got there. I'm not approving how they got there, but I understand how they got there. It's pure neglect on some level, right? To get to a mindset of I don't care about anything means you had to be taught you weren't important. So no one cared about you. So you had to self-soothe. So you had to do all these things where you kept sympathizing and poor me, poor me, poor me, woe is me. That now you do things that are very callous to the world where you don't care about life and other things. And you can say, well, it is what it is, right? To me, that is sympathizing because you're only seeing something for the pity that it is. That is all you can do with sympathy. There's no helping. If I give you a hug, I give you a hug. It doesn't solve the problem. It might make you feel better in the moment, but that's not going to do anything. If I can empathize with you and you allow me to, I can give you possible solutions and outcomes to at least put the ladder in the hole so that when you're done sympathizing with yourself, you can walk to that ladder of empathy and crawl out of the hole and use the tools that others are trying to hand to you so that you can get yourself out of these situations. We can't keep blaming the world on things that we, at some point when we're by ourselves, when most people, because I used to do it, when we decide, oh, I need to drink. Okay, well, in that moment, you took your body to the physical store to buy a physical bottle, to use physical money, to do a spiritual thing back at home, to lose yourself. When you can sit in yourself and do the same thing with yourself and say, listen, we can go into our physical body into our mental space, into our emotional space, into everything else that we've learned about history and what we've been taught and who we become, and why we feel these ways and how we have to feel this way, and should we feel this way, and do I have to keep feeling this way, is how you empathize yourself through life. This is how you give yourself answers, and you stop beating yourself up. I was a huge person of beating myself up because I was always told, if you do everything right, according to standards, again, social decorum. This is why I said I don't love social decorum. There's necessary points of people need to be respectful of others' boundaries, but making up social rules of how you're supposed to talk, act, and when and which situations are appropriate is really a hindrance to our growth as a species. If we're not communicating through our emotions and our thoughts, then how are we communicating? Through digital spaces only, which we're sharing our thoughts and emotions in, right? But in the physical space, we don't actually understand what real empathy is and what real sympathy is, right? I understand that we want people to feel good because we want to please the environment. I was told in this moment I'm supposed to do this because this person's doing this. But that's a lot of the situation is we have people who have grown to be purposeful manipulators and unpurposeful manipulators, because by way of being purposeful, when somebody decides, when you say you're a mentor and they're like, I'm no one's mentor. We don't want to be, but at the end of the day, we all become someone's mentor. And it's your choice to say, well, if I'm going to do this thing, at least let me do it in the most responsible way so that people aren't out here hurting themselves. I'm not going to put any faces or words to that. People can choose to do what they want. Same on the other side. If I understand that I'm going to empathize with others, I understand that I cannot make it always about me, but I have to want to still understand that in that moment, the exchange is, I'm not making it about me. I'm just giving you an example of how someone who is human like you went through a similar situation, and here are the physical things I did to get you out, because emotionally right now it's too cloudy for you to see how to get out of that quicksand, right? And most people are just drowning in a pool of emotions, and that's okay. You're supposed to feel it. You should know the depths of yourself. Everyone should know the deepest depths of how low they can go so that they know how to get out. Because when you fall apart, even the tiniest little, for you, it might be a sinkhole. For somebody else, it might be like a little hole. And they're like, oh my gosh, it's probably the biggest hole of their life because they've never had to deal with anything bigger. So this is why I say when you see people melting down different ways, I empathize with them, but I don't take over their story. I don't engage in that energy, because as soon as I give them sympathy, boom, I'm in their web of lies, of weaves, of manipulation. I'll empathize and say, okay, I see where you're coming from, but you still gonna have to figure this out. And that's the parental energy that most people don't want to accept. As we get older, we have to walk into our elderhood gracefully. I am not going to walk into my elderhood fighting and yelling, I'm not going to listen to this or that. I'm not. No, I've learned enough that I better listen. If I don't listen, I'm not going to be able to trust myself. And if I don't trust myself, I'm definitely not going to know how to trust others around me in a way that I know that they're actually showing up for me. Remember, we have a lot of people around us who love our energy but do not like us. Does that make sense? And I do not want people who know how to sympathize with my pain, but on the outside looking in, they're like, this goofy bitch, blah, 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 always complaining. Their life isn't even that bad. And when I sat back and I finally empathized with myself and said, okay, here's how I fix this. Here's how I get myself through this. Coddle yourself through it, but keep on going every day, baby, because we're not done yet, right? I started being able to see the people when they thought I was solved in that hole, out there whispering, I could help them, but I'm not going to help them. Let's see how they get out of this. And I'm like, okay. Note it. Note it. And so I've watched a lot of people do this. They will sit in your face and be like, oh my God, poor baby, and then go tell all your business. And be like, well, they were talking about it to everyone. No, they were just expressing a moment of need, and you took it and monetized your energy and used it as currency to other people, and just, yeah. That's that. Anyways, I hope it makes sense. Learn the difference between sympathy and empathy is all I'm saying. It's okay to feel for others, but do not integrate your energy into manipulation and then wonder why we have so many manipulators who think it's normal to just be a-holes. Love ya.